Terrific. Terrific. Thank you so much. Our final student speaker this evening is Bruce Harris. Bruce is a senior biology major from La Center, Kentucky. Now that's two. Somebody mentioned Lilly, Kentucky, and I'm not sure where that is. And now I've got La Center, Kentucky, so I'm sure you'll clear that up for us. Bruce will continue his studies this fall at Samford University School of Pharmacy. Bruce was a member of the first group at Lindsey to become Bonner leaders. So Bruce, we're anxious to hear from you.
Thank you, Jim, for those kind remarks. Before we get going, I am a third-year Bonner. Most of you noticed when I stood up because I'm at the head table, so naturally you looked up when I stood up. I am a third-year Bonner, and I just want to start by saying I used to think that the best 3 years of my life were certainly the 3 that I spent in kindergarten. But I think they're without a doubt the 3 I've spent as a Bonner. They have surpassed my expectations. And I do know how to tie my shoe and keep them tied. I can even double knot. So I've come a long way. And tonight, naturally, anyone that knows me knows I don't write anything down, and I'm just going to get up here and ramble. And tonight I was thinking about what I would say. It's my senior year, and this is it. And I begin to think about what has made my experience here, and the thought occurred to me. What makes us great? It was just today at the dedication of the building to Sue Stivers that I mentioned to a trustee who was talking about how much money we were spending. And he said, "Isn't it great that we're doing so well?" And I said, "Isn't it amazing that God continues to bless us?" In the midst of economic depressions, some would say, in the midst of turmoil as far as financial situations go, I'm talking to Jim because he's a financial guy and he's been talking about it all day. But in the midst of that, isn't it great how God has continued to bless us? In the midst of that, we are able to move forward with visions and dreams that were never thought possible. Have you ever thought about that? What makes us different from all of those colleges who are folding every day because they have an insupportive board of trustees, or they're unable to raise the funds necessary to just maintain minimal operation? Have you ever thought about that? I can't imagine what Lindsey Wilson College would be like if it hadn't been for folks like you, if it hadn't been for visionaries and those who are but ghostly named now in our archives and our oral history of the college here. If they hadn't had what I call a Martin Luther King moment. You remember the famous speech, don't you, the night before he was assassinated? He was in front of a podium much like this, and do you remember what he said? He said, "I have been to the mountaintop, and I have seen the promised land." And when I look out here tonight, I can't help but envision the promised land that our forefathers here must have seen 100 years ago, when the first shovel of dirt was pulled up to build the first building of Lindsey Wilson College. Do you think that they could have ever envisioned that we would have come this far? I can't help but think about that I don't think about the 21st chapter of John. In my Bible, I believe the heading is Peter's Second Calling. But it's a phenomenal story about Peter. You remember the story. He cast his nets and there were no fish, and Jesus came up and he said, "Haven't you any fish?" And we lose a lot of that story in translation, and I want to clear something up right here tonight. That story is told in the English language as Jesus said, "Peter, do you love me more than these?" But in the Greek language, there was 2 different words used when Jesus was speaking to Peter. Jesus said, "Peter, do you agape me?" And the Greek agape is a love despite the response. Peter, do you love me despite the response? Do you love me more than all your earthly possessions? And it goes on, in the final time, Jesus uses the lowest form of love known to man at that time, a friendship kind of love. He says, "Peter, do you phileo me?" Meaning, Peter, I understand that you're unable to make a commitment that large because you can't comprehend it. But can you love me just a little? And do you remember what happened in that story? Do you remember how Peter was blessed? Do you remember how he went on to serve the Lord? When I think about Lindsey Wilson College, I know that somewhere it had to happen that somebody had a pile of fish somewhere here. I'm not sure which building was built that day, and I'm not sure who was named the Board of Trustees that day, but somewhere we had a pile of fish. And somewhere somebody scooted a little closer to that pile and they said, Jesus, we love you more than these. Whatever you would have us to do, that's what we want to do. And I think it is the single reason that we're still here today. In closing, I'm reminded of another verse from John, perhaps the most quoted verse in the entire world. John 3:16. You remember where it says, For God so loved the world that he gave his only begotten Son, that whosoever shall believeth in him shall not perish but have everlasting life. Do you remember that? Have you ever taken into consideration about whosoever might be? Have you thought about that? Who is whosoever? See, here at Lindsey Wilson College, we know that we're unable to save people. But you know what we're able to do? We're able to make life a little more pleasant while they're here. We're able to serve as a constant reminder that in the midst of the turmoil that we know as life, that there are still people who care about the well-being of the whole being of every being. Have you ever thought about that? And that's what we're about? See, I was a student who came here, and education's not what I came for. I came here because I realized that life at home wasn't what I thought it should be. And I knew that God had bigger plans for me. And so when I pulled up here in August of 2004, I pulled into a place where I knew absolutely no one. And every earthly possession I owned was in my car. And I knew that this was home, and I knew that God had called me here, and not for failure. And so when I talk to you tonight, and I mention whosoever for Lindsey Wilson College was certainly Bruce Harris. And I challenge you tonight, if you knew that whosoever was Bruce Harris, Alyssa Gooden, or Holly Clevenger, if you knew that whosoever could be changed the way that we've been changed, what would you have done different? You see, we're strong today, but we've got a bright future ahead of us, and we're not going to make it to our goal without you. So I challenge you tonight, think of the whosoevers of the world. Think of the whosoevers that need a place like Lindsey Wilson College to call home. Think of the whosoevers and challenge yourself that no matter what you give, no matter what you do to help support us, may it never be so much that you never ask yourself, did I do enough? Did I do enough for the whosoevers that need Lindsey Wilson College? Thank you.